I cannot tell you how excited I am to be showing you my very first room transformation for someone other than myself. So I'm going to take you through the whole design process. So from meeting with the client to picking furniture pieces and the decor to refurbishing old furniture and going and doing the wallpaper, the painting, the wainscoting, the everything. I really hope you like this. I'm so proud of the result and I hope you like it too. Hey everyone, Nicole Herrick here. This is Megan Thompson.
Hello.
So Megan is a celebrant and we're going to make over her office / meeting room.
Yeah.
So Megan and her husband and kids have just built a brand new house and it is absolutely gorgeous, and she has a room at the front of her house so that the clients don't need to come all the way in. It's blank at the moment, so we are ready to get stuck in and do some designing and make it all beautiful for her clients. So tell us about what kind of style you're looking for.
So when we started building this house, like you always got to think about a kind of theme or style, and I think overall what I like, my husband doesn't really care, but I think overall I would describe my style as the Hamptons style. When I was younger, I was sort of like into everything modern, which I think most young people are, but as I get older, I started to appreciate a more classic. So Hamptons is a bit cleaner, fresher. I'm quite averse to colour, so it's very much based on black and white. Which is nice, and I find it just overall quite cozy and classic. Definitely a luxe feel, but still warm and cozy, if that makes sense.
Okay, so here is an initial sketch. So let me know what you think of this. What are we thinking about the seagrass wallpaper, the fireplace, all that kind of thing? So first initial impressions, even if you hate it, totally fine.
I love the layout that you've designed. Just the placement of the chairs, table, the mirror, everything like that. I think it's perfect because it is quite, it is going to be a difficult space to play with because it is quite narrow.
Okay, cool. So now let's talk about the budget and the things that we need to buy.
Right, okay,
All right, so I've written a list of the things that I think we're probably going to need to buy.
Okay.
So do you have a particular budget in mind?
Like more?
At the end of the video, I'm going to reveal just how much the actual shoestring budget was in order to achieve our luxury look, and how it compares to what we could have spent if we'd shopped in luxury stores and paid specialised tradespeople. Let's take a look at the room. So the room is actually very narrow. It's about half the size of a normal bedroom. It's 2.4 metres wide by 4 metres long. And at the moment it kind of looks like we're going to really struggle to fit in a desk, 2 armchairs, and then some more storage for things like the printer and files. So now I need to measure everything up so that I can draw an accurate plan to scale. So I've measured the width, length and the height of my room, and I'm also measuring the window and making sure I know how far it is from the ceiling and the walls and the floor. And I'm also going to measure the baseboards because that's really important for my wainscoting. So here's my basic plan all drawn up to scale. So this allows me to know what size furniture limitations I have to be able to fit into this space. I drew this in Adobe InDesign, but you can use something like Microsoft Publisher or even just graph paper. I also did a little 3D perspective drawing just so I could visualize it a little bit better than the sketch. Then I did up an elevation. So this helps me to work out how much wallpaper I need to buy, plus the wainscoting. So I drew it all out exactly to scale so that I can see exactly what size I want my boxes, my chair rail, and then how many pieces of timber I'm going to need, and then what I need to cut those pieces of timber down into. I then put everything on one page and printed it out so I had my master plan ready to take to the timber store and on site. Next it was time to shop up some uber bargains with Gumtree, eBay, lots of op shops and Kmart. I scored all these amazing pieces for a fraction of what you would normally pay in designer stores, and we're going to revamp them. The only shit thing about buying such good bargains is having to go and pick them all up all over Melbourne, but luckily I have way too much time on my hands. The first step is always giving your item a really good clean down. Oh hey, did you know these things come off? That's actually how you attach it to the wall. To prep each piece, I used Polysurface Prep. Now this is instead of sanding. It's basically a light oil that you wipe all over your surface and then you leave it for 24 hours and it actually etches into the surface. This is perfect for woods that have like a gloss varnish on them, and you can see that it actually makes everything really shiny and it gives a really sticky film to everything. For primer, I use the Zinza 123. Now this is really important to use a stain blocking primer when you're painting any kind of dark furniture. Otherwise that dark surface is just going to bleed through right into the top layer. So I used a small paintbrush just to do a layer in all of the little nooks and crannies. So this was really important to get a nice even coverage. And then I just used a roller to go over all of the larger surfaces. Don't worry about how patchy it looks at this stage. There is 2 top coats to go on each piece of furniture. But luckily I find painting very therapeutic. So for my top coats I used the Dulux Aquenamel. That was because it was $20 because it was a mist tint. What a bargain. Give it a good shake and I won't put you through the pain of 2 top coats. So here is the final product. How pretty and brand new does that look? Next up is this pretty brown cabinet that I wanted to paint grey, but I didn't want to go and buy another paint can, so I just mixed in some black and a little bit of blue acrylic to get this lovely grey colour. Now let's do a top coat on this. Don't worry, I've already done the base coat, so it's not too boring for you. And can I just say, it is so incredibly satisfying to take an ugly brown piece of furniture and turn it into a really pretty little grey piece that you would never know cost $25. Here's a little tip: when taking off the hinges initially off any piece of furniture, make sure you label exactly which door it came from and which hinge goes where, because furniture warps over time and if you put it back in the wrong spot, you might not get them lining up perfectly for this. Oh, so satisfying. I bought these pretty little crystal knobs to replace the old daggy handles, and before I painted I made sure I filled in the existing holes with wood filler so that I could position my new handles anywhere I wanted. Obviously measure everything up so it's nice and even. There is nothing worse than handles that are not in the right spot. And I used a smaller drill to drill the first few holes, and then a bigger drill bit to be big enough for the screws. And then I popped the screws through, threaded them on. You can see what I'm doing. Why am I talking? Anyway, here we go. Satisfaction. Now this piece was the biggest transformation of all. It was a console table, 2 chests of drawers, and I used 2 belts and some nuts and bolts to turn it into a beautiful desk. So obviously I did all the priming, prep, undercoat, top coats, all that kind of thing. And then I got to the belts and basically I just cut them into the right length for some handles. And I made some little templates so that I knew exactly where to put the holes on every single handle. Just did those with the drill. And then I made a template for each of my drawer fronts just so that everything was going to be in exactly the same position. And my cup head bolts actually had a larger bit that needed to go down into the drawers for the first bit. So I used a spade bit for this, and then I used a quite large drill bit for the bolts to be able to go through into the back. I actually used the suede side of the belt facing outwards, and I think it gave a really expensive feeling, and it really went with that Hamptons style. I was so impressed with how these looked when it went together. It was finally time to head to the office and get cracking on some wallpaper. Here are some of the tools you'll need. But make sure that you get caught in a rainstorm on your first day on site so that you can look super awesome like me. And let's go. Once the room is completely empty and you have all of the heights of all of your furniture pieces, you need to mark these out on the wall so you can double check where you want to put the height of your chair rail, and then this determines where your wallpaper is going to go. So I used my masking tape and just wrote the exact heights of the fireplace, sideboard, desk, all that kind of thing. And I put those on the wall, and then I marked where I thought I wanted my chair rail to go. I stood back and had a look and decided it was a little bit high, so I brought that down a little bit, had another look, and I was now happy with exactly where the chair rail was going to go all the way around the room. It's a good idea to actually measure the width of your wallpaper rolls, because what it's marked on the label versus what it actually is in real life can sometimes differ. Next up, I measured the center point of the wall and then half of the width of one wallpaper panel so I could figure out where to put my plumb line. So I just stuck a piece of string to the top of the broom, grabbed something heavy like my pliers and tied it to the bottom of the string, and then I let that hang until it fell directly vertical. Once it's level, you can tape that to the wall, pop another one in the middle for a bit of extra stability, and take off your heavy object, and then you get a perfect plumb line. And just for double checking, I measured the top and the bottom of the wall just to make sure it didn't differ too much. I then cut my wallpaper into strips, allowing 5 centimeters at the top and bottom. Next, I mixed up the wallpaper paste or glue. It did have directions on the back of how much to use, but I, of course, did not read that, and I put about 4 times the amount of the granules in to what I needed to. And I ended up with quite a stiff, unmovable mess. You leave it to sit for 2 minutes. But all I did was I transferred half of that out into another one and popped some more water in, and it was fine. I laid the first panel out on a long table, the desk, which was really handy, and you can see here how the glue actually soaks in. So on the right it soaked in, on the left I'm still rolling it out. So you want it to be soaked in like that. That gives the wallpaper a bit of pliability, and you can kind of stretch it around a little bit on the wall. Once it's all coated, fold your wallpaper over onto itself, allowing enough to stick on the first piece up onto the wall. Now don't worry, it will come unstuck from each other really easily. Carefully smooth your first piece onto the wall, allowing a few extra centimeters at the top that you're going to cut off, and you're going to be lining up that right hand side with the plumb line that you did earlier, and then just unsticking your piece of wallpaper, and then you're just going to take your time, smooth everything out slowly, carefully. It takes a little bit of learning at the start, but once you get into it, it's really a fun job actually. Use a scraper tool to smooth out any little bubbles, and it's pretty easily and workable. So if you need to move it over to the left or the right a little bit, that's totally doable. You can also use a sponge just to go over the edges and try and make sure everything is really stuck down carefully. If you find that there's some pieces that just aren't sticking well, just fold it off the wall and add a little bit more glue and then smooth it down again. It's really forgiving, this stuff. Now you can continue to put up more panels surrounding, working your way outwards towards the corners of the room. When you get to the corners of the room, just pop some masking tape down on the opposite wall, and this saves you from getting glue on the other wall. And also just cut your pieces to about 1 centimeter larger than you need.
So now what are you doing?
These girls are so cute. Alright, so now I'm just finishing up this panel, and then I'm going to cut off all of the excess along the side of the walls. So using a very sharp Stanley knife and your scraper, just gently glide down the wall, and also do it along the top section. The wallpaper we use is a grass cloth, and it gives a beautiful textural luxury feel. Before I cut up any of my moulding pieces, I primed and top coated all of the pieces, including the chair rail, just so that was easier to go onto the wall. I also did a coat of paint over the whole section where we were doing the wainscoting, because we wanted to make the top and the bottom slightly different in colour. It looks the same here, but we actually did an ever so slightly darker grey on the lower section where the wainscoting is. Most people would do this white, but we wanted to do grey on grey. Let's take a closer look at the plan I drew up to do my wainscoting. So this is the chair rail, this line along here. So this is what we need to install first. This line along here is the baseboard, and that's already in place. Now these are the corners of the room, so you can see that I've got all four walls splayed out onto one. But so you need to take note that when it's at a corner, you'll need to be doing a 45mm cut, but when it meets a window or a surface like a fireplace or a door, that's a 90-degree cut. Now let's take a look at our boxes. So you can see that all of the heights of each box is 77. And this will vary depending on where you want your chair rail in the room. But all of these will be the same. So you can literally just go and cut as many boxes as you've got times 2 to get all of these the same height. But you can see that I've actually varied the width of my boxes, and that's because all walls are going to be slightly different in terms of how many boxes we can actually fit on each wall, and we want them to look as consistent as possible. But you can see here that on this wall, if I had have done 2 boxes on each side at the window, they would have been far too tiny. So it doesn't actually matter that I have one big one over here that is 75.3 centimeters wide, and then over here we've got some really tiny ones that are 43.5 centimeters wide. That's about a 30 centimeter difference, and it actually in the room looks perfectly normal. Having these different widths is just part of the wainscoting process, and don't be too scared to make them as much as 30 centimeters in difference. You can see I've also got labeled here the height from the bottom of my chair rail down to the outside edge of the box, and I've also got marked here the outside edge of one box to the outside edge of another box. So this 11.6 centimeters from the bottom of the chair rail stays consistent across the whole lot of boxes, but this 14 centimeters, it actually only goes in between the boxes. Your measurement outside of your 2 boxes on each wall is going to depend on how much space you've got there. Just vary it slightly if you need to, and it will be fine. You can see there's a smaller gap here than there is here, but because there's a corner meeting here, it really doesn't matter and it really doesn't look weird. So ahead of time, I'd chosen exactly what chair rail I wanted to use and knew that it was going to be 5.4 meters long. I drew this 5.4 meters to scale and then placed in my pieces that I needed to be able to cut, so I could figure out exactly how many pieces of the chair rail I needed to buy. Then I worked out that my molding that I needed to make the wainscoting was going to be 2.4 meter lengths, and I again laid these out and figured out exactly how many pieces, which was 19, in order to make the wainscoting. Let's get chopping. Installing a chair rail is ever so slightly harder when you only have one person, but luckily I had an extra tripod laying around, and I actually pre-tapped in some nail holes so that I could just stick them in there and start hammering instead of having to hold them just on that first right hand side. So for your moldings, figure out which is going to be your top edge. So my rounder edge is going to be the top, and you're always going to be measuring that outside edge. For cutting all of your subsequent pieces after you've cut one, you can just utilize the inside corners of your existing piece that you want the same length as. Now I needed to use masking tape because the edges were tending to chip off if I didn't protect them with some masking tape. I ended up usually putting 2 layers of masking tape on each piece before I cut it. It's a good idea to cut a couple of pieces of stability boards to lay underneath your thin molding board. This just helps it stop from chipping as well. Once you've got your piece cut, just double check that they line up to be exactly the same length. Lastly, mark the length of that board on the back so that you know from your master plan where this piece needs to go. In the room, I measured the halfway point of the very first wall, and then I measured down my 11.6 centimeters. I found my piece that I was going to put on first, which was the center box, the top piece, and I marked the halfway point. I could then line that up with the halfway point of the wall. use my level, and then nail it in. So I used a staple gun, which I had brad nails in. If you have a power brad nailer, that's even better. I was hoping that the brad nails would be strong enough to hold the pieces on the wall by themselves, but I ended up using a hammer and some longer nails later on just to reinforce every piece. You can use liquid nails with these, but I wanted to not do too much damage to the walls, just in case you wanted to take them all off at another stage and not have to re-gyprock, sheetrock, whatever you want to call it, later on. And just before you start dropping some comments below about how wonky my boxes are, I promise it is just the angle of the camera in this shot. So at this point I am starting to just hammer in all of the nails, and I'm also punching them as I go. So grab yourself a nail punch and just punch them in so that they sit slightly below the surface of all of your moldings. So when you are hammering in your nails, use a locking process. So this is where you aim 2 of the nails heading upwards and then 2 of the nails heading downwards, and then this makes the molding lock into the wall so that you can't just simply pull it straight out. The next step is to fill in all the nail holes. Make sure you use wood filler, not putty. And once that's dry, you give it a quick sand down and do a little bit of paint over the top in your same color. And I wanted to show you this piece precisely because this is a massive gap in my corner. And once it's actually done, filled, you would never know that I had a ridiculously large gap. So the fireplace I bought was a faux electric fireplace designed to be mounted into the wall, but rather than cut a hole in her wall, we decided that we were just going to take out the electrical pieces and build it out ever so slightly so that it would fit on the outside of the wall. How interesting is the inside of these fireplaces? I had no idea that it was just some little pieces of plastic that were blown around by a fan and a couple of lights. It actually looks very realistic when it's on. So here's what the back of the iron arch actually looks like. It was only 7 centimeters that I needed to build it out from the wall. So I just used some lengths of pine to create a little lip that goes around the back of the mantelpiece. I definitely advise getting some help from someone else to carry these pieces, because as you can hear from my grunting and puffing, they are very heavy. If your light is classed as DIY, you can do it yourself, but make sure you turn off all power at the mains before you do anything with lighting and electrical. So here's a look at the existing wiring. So the red is live, the black is neutral, and the yellow and green is the earth or the ground wire. So you simply need to unscrew these to get them out and take off the whole piece. And then here's the new piece. So here it's marked as L for my live, which is red, N for neutral, which is black, and then the earth wire is that green and yellow one into the middle. So all I needed to do was screw in my mounting bracket, and luckily the existing holes from the previous light fitted to be able to screw that into. If you don't, just drill some holes in the ceiling wherever you need to and insert wall plugs, and then you can screw directly into those. Then I connected the wires into the right sockets and screwed them up nice and tight so that they weren't going to fall out. And then I mounted the light to the mounting bracket. I then adjusted the spotlights to land perfectly on the areas I wanted to illuminate. so I am finally finished. Megan is just about to come and see the room. She promises me that she has not snuck a peek, even though this is in her own home. And I'm really scared. This is the first decorating job that I've done for anyone other than myself, so it's really nerve-wracking to see how she's gonna feel about it. And yeah, I just hope she likes it.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
This is really scary for me to...
This looks amazing! Look at this!
So your files are gonna go in here.
Yeah.
I just saw something on that. And your
Yeah.
printer as well.
Yeah. You're amazing.
And your art
I
print.
love that!
Yeah, so we got that from Etsy, and it's a heart and a androgynous two hands.
Oh
Doesn't matter if you're
my
marrying a
God.
man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, or a man and a man.
That is amazing.
What were we making earlier today?
The belts.
Yeah.
Oh my god. This is so cool. Oh my god. Thank you so much. This looks amazing.
It was so much fun.
It looks so much bigger as
I
well.
know! It looks twice the size of what it was. Do you remember like how just cramped and empty it was?
I would never have thought in a million years that this stuff would fit in here.
I know. I'm so glad that we didn't get those really expensive chairs because they would have been huge.
They're perfect.
Yeah.
So let's quickly talk budget. Here are a few of the key pieces that we spent considerably less than we would have just by shopping around and buying secondhand, doing things up, painting them. And there's obviously a huge list that we had to buy to be able to do this room, not to mention things like labor and design costs. But in the end, I think you'll see that we spent a really nice budget compared to what we could have spent had we just done everything straight out of the shops.
Thank you so much for watching. That was so much fun. I can't believe I did that. I'm so exhausted, but it was so worth it, especially to see the look on her face. I almost got a tear out of her. If you would like to see me do more tutorials like this, just leave a comment below, give me a like, please, and subscribe if you like the type of content on my channel. And if there's any sponsors out there that are looking for new content providers that may happen to be the love child of MacGyver and Martha Stewart, then hey, hit me up. Thanks, guys.
Is it on?
It
Is this
is.
thing on?
It is.
What are you still doing here?